Hello, this is Johnny Jackson. Today I'm going to be tying a Lawson's electric caddis, or at least my version of it. This is a fly that I was introduced to out in Idaho a few years back, and bought a couple in the shop and then walked around the shop, find materials to try to deconstruct it and so that I could tie it myself. And so yeah, this is my version. The fly was originally developed by Mike Lawsons from Henry's Fork Angler, and I have seen a video where he's tying it, and mine is slightly different. But as I said, this is my version of Lawson's electric caddis. Okay, so let's get started. I am tying this on a size 14 Scud hook, or in this case it's actually it's a fulling mill 1160. They call it a super grub hook, but generally a Scud hook be the same as a U202 from Umpqua or a Tiemco 2457. I've got a 2.8 millimeter black tungsten bead tied on, and now I'm gonna put some thread wraps on. I'm using UTC tan, could also use an olive because this is an olive colored bug, but UTC 70 denier thread. I will take thread wraps down into the bend of the hook, snip my thread off. I am also going to use some ultra wire Brassie and Chartreuse, and so I'm going to take my piece of wire, and I will when I'm tying in wire on a bead head, I'll generally stick the end of the bead wire all the way up inside the bead, and that just keeps everything locked in place, and I can just run that wire, and I've got it in this case on the side of the hook. You could do it on top of the shank, but again I'll wrap it down, the wire all the way down into the bend of the hook. And now the other material that I'm going to use is some holographic tinsel in Chartreuse. This is UTC holographic Chartreuse tinsel in medium. And I will lay a piece of this tinsel on top of the shank of the hook and tie it in. I'll actually kind of lay it on the side, my side of the hook as I start taking wraps, and then the first couple of wraps will push it over on top of the shank of the hook, and then I'll just hold it down, hold it with tension to the rear of the hook, and that allows me to tie it right down the shank of the hook until I get to the point of the wire. For dubbing, I am using, to start with, we're going to use two different dubbings, but I'm using Hairline laser dub. I've also used Hairline Sinews laser dub, and this is in olive. They also have a light olive that works very well. So I will take a pinch of the dubbing. And this bug, you don't need to make it very thick. This is a fairly fine dubbing with some color variations. So I will start wrapping the noodle dubbing onto my thread with a noodle, as a noodle, just spinning it onto the thread, and get maybe about 3 inches. Keep that noodle fairly thin. Once I've got it on, I'll take a couple of wraps, and then I'll wrap rearward 2 wraps just to overlap, and now I'll bring the dubbing back forward up the hook shank. I'm really not trying to get much of a taper body. I keep this body fairly thin as I go up, and I wrap it up to the bead. I've got more dubbing on than I need, so I'm actually just going to take my scissors and snip that off. Once I've got the dubbing in place, then I grab my tinsel, and this becomes where it's a little tricky to try and get the tinsel to lay right on top of the hook. And so I generally, you can see I switched hands here, and I hold the tinsel down over the bead, and I take a couple of wraps. In my case, this case it pulled off. I take a couple of wraps and get that locked into place, and a few more wraps. Then I'll snip that off. some dubbing that's stuck to my thread and bobbin. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap that onto the head, get it out of my way. And now we're going to take the wire and wrap it up, making segments in the body. So as you do this, you want to pull tension on the wire and just leave enough gaps to make a nice segmentation. But this will lock that tensile down on top. And I try to keep my segments about evenly spaced. You cannot really see the backing, the tensile probably in the video, but I'm just keeping it locked down on top. And when I get up to the bead, I take a couple of wraps and then I wrap my thread over and under and over a couple of times to lock that piece of wire in place. And then I'll snip off the wire. You could also helicopter. I don't know if I said, but the wire is Brassie, so it's just a little harder to helicopter. And now we're going to do a collar of dubbing up right behind the bead, and I am using Ice Dub Olive Brown, and just take a very small pinch of this, make a small noodle. Doesn't take much for the collar, and do 3 or 4 good wraps, maybe 4 or 5 good wraps of dubbing up here. Actually, probably got just a little much turned on there. Wrap it in, a couple of wraps behind the bead with the thread, and now I will do a whip finish. Tie that off. And I'll put a drop of Sally Hansen's for head cement on those wraps of thread. And there you have my version of the Lawson's electric caddis. This fishes very well. It's fished very well for me on Little Red and the Norfolk, and a little bit of success on the white. But I've fished this effectively everywhere. Thank you.